And so you have to be very careful about some of the language that you use sometimes to that doesn't disenfranchise someone, that may come from a background like mine, right? Because I and I say that because I just learned about the financial system when I got to college, and I learned, and my understanding matured as an adult. So you don't want to say things to me like, this is so simple, a 5-year-old can do it, right?
Good morning, HR. I'm Mike Coffey, and this is the podcast where I talk to business leaders about bringing people together to create value for shareholders, customers, and the community. Please follow, rate, and review Good Morning HR on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or at goodmorninghr.com. Diversity is a hot topic for employers today. And not only are businesses trying to diversify their employee population, they're trying to develop services and products for specific demographics in their consumer population as well. Our guest today insists that a diverse employee population will help a business serve a diverse consumer population. Now, been in HR a long time, and over especially the last 6 or 7 years, I've met a lot of just real wackadoodle people claiming the title of diversity consultant who have no idea how businesses actually run or understand their need to actually make a profit. And I'm glad to say that Dion Harrison, my guest today, is not one of them. Dion is a senior director over banking products at Elevate Credit. He is also Elevate's chief diversity officer, where he built out Elevate's employee resource groups, which now include women in technology, LGBTQ, military, and the Mosaic Multicultural Networks. Welcome to Good Morning HR, Dion.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
And we'll see if in the next 30 minutes I can out you as a wackadoodle, but we'll see.
It's
But really,
possible.
you've got over 20 years of product development experience at companies like Citi and Wells Fargo. These are serious financial firms that are profit driven. And you're not an HR guy. So how did you end up in the diversity role at Elevate?
It's been an interesting journey, and I'll tell you that I think that all of my experience in the banking industry has really made me feel far more comfortable with understanding the direction that we need to go with our diversity, equity, and inclusion program at Elevate. Throughout history, I think that we've seen many times where diverse communities have been disadvantaged in the financial mainstream. And it's disproportionately towards minority groups in particular. But that doesn't just mean, that it's been disproportionately against, ethnic groups. It's also been gender groups as well, and also sexual orientation. And I think, over the years, I've learned a lot about financial services, which has helped me to better understand that there is a way that we can reimagine or re-engineer kind of the way our financial system works in order to give better access to those disadvantaged groups. And so I think I've had some very fortunate, career opportunities throughout all these different companies that I've worked for. And the reality is that they've always given me an opportunity to work from my perspective. And what I mean by that is I grew up as a country kid in North Carolina, and we grew up on a farm. My grandfather had a few acres of land that he would farm every single year. And when we would farm this land, he would give away a bunch of food to people that were in our community, to churches and things of that nature. And I always grew up thinking, like I'm the man, because I got, my friends and everyone just kind of rolling through our yard, picking up food all the time. And we were very resourceful. And my grandfather taught us to be very self-sufficient, self-reliant. And the reality is that I saw a bunch of different people that were running through my yard. There were Black people, there were white people, there were, just a variety of different folks, because everybody gets hungry, right? And that was the one thing that we all had in common. And we all had in common this need for better resources and more access to things, right? And so I kind of grew up in this environment that always gave me some sort of a feeling of success whenever I gave back to people in a way that allowed them to have some progress or allowed them to have resources that they needed, And, when I went into financial services, I went to school for architectural engineering, but I went into financial services thinking to myself, what's a way that I can re-engineer this, some of these systems, some of these processes to cater to to those disadvantaged groups. And along the way, we definitely, I was very fortunate again to work with some leadership that listened to what I had to say, and there were other people that had some really great ideas about how to do the same thing. And what I learned throughout that whole entire process is that the financial services system just wasn't getting significantly better for everyone, and it's been a very slow progress. And so when I got to Elevate, I was very fortunate to have the opportunity to have some interactions with our legislative leaders. I was asked to go up to meet with some of our congressional members and talk about financial inclusion and how the financial system could change in order to better, give more advantages, give more solutions to people in diverse communities, specifically those in rural communities and minority communities. And we've ideated about a lot of different things, from not just banking systems but also broadband, and even food insecurity. I mean, there's a number of different tentacles that end up affecting the entire life cycle, or the holistic life cycle, right? And so what I learned through most of these conversations is, again, many disadvantaged groups, but also a lot of intersectionality and how the financial system kind of plays out. And I think I became more of an advocate for trying to identify how some of these intersections were causing additional problems or additional challenges. I was also very fortunate that we have a consumer research group at Elevate called the Center for New Middle Class that had started down this path of learning about these individual consumer groups and learning how they were being disadvantaged, and really kind of pointing out the uniqueness of each one of these groups. And it actually helped us better from a product development perspective, because then we understood how to communicate. We understood what some of the incentives were for a lot of these disadvantaged groups. And I think, quite honestly, it's made our company a lot better because we have taken a lot of that intel and we've really kind of reshaped the way that we do our product development and the way that we do solutions. But it also started to change us as individuals. I mean, the reality is, once you understand how someone else is being disadvantaged and some of the unintended consequences of the way that the system is set up right now, and how we even participate in that, and how we, could potentially change it, it definitely starts to change us. Which is why the company, when they asked me to become the chief diversity officer, the real kind of edict there was to really start to change our corporate culture. Because I think what we all started to realize is that in order to really kind of change the system, we've kind of have to change ourselves first. And we have to be just better humans, and really to spend some time being reflective and more understanding of the people that are around us, the community that's around us, in order to better serve and better understand how do we serve and interact with those different groups, because they are all around us. And we've learned a ton of stuff just through trying to engage with local businesses in the DFW area, bringing them in-house and learning more about some of the things that they're doing. And we found a lot of things that were in common across different ethnic groups, gender groups. And I think, it's just making us a better corporate culture and the way that we approach our products overall.
So then, is your role as chief diversity officer at Elevate, is that more than just looking at the demographics or characteristics of your employee population? Do you also have responsibility for making sure that your marketplace is diverse as well, or that you're addressing that?
Yeah, diversity it can't just stop at just looking at demographics internally. I mean, the reality is that we do have a very diverse work group at Elevate. Almost 40% of our management team is women, right? And we have about 23% of our population that are in the Asian population. We have about 16% that are Black. We have a fairly uniquely diverse company with rolling up close to 500 people that are there. And quite honestly, I feel like we have the perfect environment to invite more people to speak up and talk about their different diversity groups and the challenges that are there, and also the commonalities that we have, in order to better understand even our customers, because we reflect the customers that we actually serve right now, and especially in the DFW community, for example. And I think it was, at least in my heart and mind, that we needed to do more from an outreach perspective within the community to not just acknowledge that internally, but also show support for those groups, so that we had, our employees felt more engaged, and that we cared about the communities that they came from, and cared about the communities that they absolutely represent. I also think that, we work in partnership with our HR team, to stay in tune to where we are. What are those demographics? What are some of those statistics? But I think by and large, we also find the gaps of where we don't know certain things. Like, we weren't very clear on how many of our employees actually went into served in the military, or how many of them were actually family members of those in the military. And that's a very important demographic for us, especially from a financial inclusion perspective, because I don't think that we had really dug deep and understood how some of the products that we put out into the marketplace were being received by military servicemen and women. And we had to actually stop and think about that. And so we've become engaged with the city of Fort Worth to get involved with the veteran fairs and better understand and support some of the financial education programs that they have deployed today. And through those programs, just by participating and being in the room and being amongst that community, we've definitely learned a lot, and are starting to come smarter about how we do our product solutions.
Okay, so let's talk just as an example. You mentioned military and military families. How are the products that they would need, the financial services type products they would need, different than just somebody else in their same income bracket?
So sometimes it's not just the product construct itself. A lot of times it's how you interact and how you communicate with folks, right? Because we have this idea that when a company creates an email and we send it out to our customer base, that one email resonates with everyone, right? And the reality is that it doesn't. It actually does not at all. In fact, if you think about the way that a lot of our military servicemen and women serve, they go into the military and they have a lot of things kind of taken care of for them, right? Like, they only have a uniform that they have to wear, and they travel with the military, and they a lot of them will live on base, and so there are things that they don't really interact with on versus someone who goes to college, has to pay for their own, apartment, get a job when they get out, and then it's kind of a little bit ambiguous as to whether or not they're going to get that job that relates to their degree or not. The military is far more structured and gives a career path, and I think to the benefit of a lot of those military servicemen and women. So when they come out of the military into more of what we call the civilian world, there are some things that are a little bit odd and or just different, in terms of how they interact with financial products and services that are available to them. And so sometimes you have to kind of over communicate a little bit and make sure that there's a clear understanding of how to interact with a product, or how to actually engage or enroll in a product. What are some of the requirements for qualifying for that product? And as you may know, some of the military folks just don't necessarily need a lot of the credit solutions that are out in the marketplace today. Some of the regulations actually prevent them from taking advantage of certain products that are in the market today. And there are certain benefits that are allowed by law for the militaries that are active military, right? And so navigating some of that is just a little bit different for them. And so we have to make sure that our customer service is actually well prepared, we're educated in order to help service those members, to help them navigate through those products, and the different nuances that are there. So we do have to be more cognizant of that. And it's very much like the Hispanic speaking population, right? By and large, a lot of banking institutions have just at one point in time, a lot of banking institutions were doing a lot of stuff for the Hispanic community and putting up websites in Spanish and, doing agreements in Spanish. And then over time, a lot of things happen, some not so great, some things that were good. But a lot of banking institutions have pulled back quite a bit with really kind of putting that Spanish material that was out there, largely due to because of misinterpretations about the terms and conditions and things of that nature. And so banks have to really be cognizant of whether or not they're putting out the right thing to communicate to that population and make sure that they're serving them the right way, and to make sure that they're not portraying that the product can do one thing and there's an expectation and then it falls short of that, right? So being clear and being transparent has always been very, very important in the banking industry. And so understanding how to do that and how to interact with different groups is very, very important for us.
So then, how is Elevate uh, addressing that with non-English, non-native English speakers? If financial, if you're, I can totally see because I in our own agreements,
Yeah.
we have documents that are in other languages, and it makes me nervous every time because I have to trust a translator to put this into Vietnamese or Spanish or whatever,
Yeah.
and you know, does this person really understand what they're signing? So how are y'all approaching that?
So at this point, we've everything that we've done has been in English, right? And the expectation is that the folks that are actually reading those materials, understand English. And we have some services in the back end that allow us to be able to help with a little bit of that interpretation, but we try not to get too deep into, especially interpreting terms and conditions and things of that nature. So we're really just at the cusp of acknowledging that there's a gap there for us and there's an opportunity for us, and we're gonna try to make it a point to try to figure out, like, how do we approach this, because it's a big thing for us to accomplish, to be quite honest with you. We have regulations around financial products is you know very broad, and there's a lot that's there, as even with HR, right? Like, there's a lot of regulations that are there, and people that are constantly looking to try to make sure that you got it right, and if you didn't get it right, then there's trouble. So what we're really trying to do is very slowly kind of stair step our way into defining who our demographic is within our customer base, and where do we place our priorities, and then better understand how do we take that approach to clarifying some of the things that we have with our products. I will say that, and not specifically with Elevate, but we did, when I worked for, previous financial institution, we did a lot in terms of trying to translate some of the bank financial agreements and things of that nature, and it did not go well. We spent a lot of money, and trying to make sure that we did it right, and it didn't go well because we found a lot of opportunities where, even in the Spanish language, there are some different dialects or interpretations that might be there that actually we didn't realize how they could be interpreted a little bit differently in some bank agreements. And so even back then, we actually even kind of pulled back on some of that and tried to simplify some of the agreements that we did have in Spanish. We'd love to get into some, and we tried our best to get into other languages as well beyond just Spanish, because our country is definitely represented by other ethnic groups. But it's not an easy task. And I think, by and large, the country has a lot that it can do in order to try to help fill some of those gaps. But we did find also that there are quite a few folks that, when we actually went out and started talking to people in those communities and asking whether that was important to them or not, we got mixed reviews from that. And some of them actually said that they actually preferred to make sure that it was still in English, because at least they knew that they were getting the exact same thing that every other American was getting, and that they weren't getting a different interpretation of something that they thought that they were getting, but they would much rather spend the time trying to learn from the English version and learn and make sure that they understood those terms and conditions than it would be to try to translate something and misinterpret. So with that kind of feedback, it gave us at least an opportunity to say, like, well, maybe we can back off of this a little bit and try to figure out how do we do some other things that we can do to attract those communities and let them know that they're accepted, and let them know that these products are for them as well. And so we spend some time thinking more, and I think this is a part of where we're going to spend most of our time here at Elevate, is working on the marketing side and on the branding side to make sure that we have materials that are diverse enough to attract those consumers, and to let those consumers know that we're thinking about the challenges that they may have. We do a lot of focus group meetings across the country to ask questions about every product that we develop. We put the product construct together in very simple terms to make sure that our customers understand it, and we ask them to be very blunt with us about whether or not this even solves a problem for them, because far too often we think that we're financial experts, and we sit in the office and we know the next best thing that's great for the consumer, but they don't know how to interact with it the way that we try to build it sometimes, because we don't spend enough time asking them, does this make sense to you? And is this convenient for you? And so we're spending much more time in that realm from a product development and marketing perspective than we are trying to necessarily translate language, because I think the language piece is a big piece for us to try to accomplish. But I think if we can even just get to the solution itself, that's far more meaningful and far more impactful for a customer's life than just the language itself.
And let's take a quick break. Good Morning HR is brought to you by Imperative, premium background checks with fast and friendly service. If you're a certified HR professional, this episode of Good Morning HR has been pre-approved for 1/2 hour of business recertification credit through HRCI and half a professional development credit through SHRM. To obtain the recertification information, visit goodmorninghr.com and click on Recert Credits. Then select episode 21 and enter the keyword Dion. That's DION. On December 9th, I'll be hosting a webinar entitled How to Fairly and Legally Evaluate Applicants' Criminal History Information. This free webinar is approved for 1 professional development credit for SHRM-certified professionals and 1 hour of general recertification credit for HRCI certified professionals. You can register for this free webinar at imperativeinfo.com. And if you're listening to this podcast after December 9th, you can still watch the recorded webinar on our website for credit for free. And now back to my conversation with Dion Harrison. And you dropped the I word earlier that makes a lot of people's heads explode: intersectionality. So, talk to me when you're looking at a product market, and so, like, I'm your average over 40, well over 40, cis white, male. How would your communication about products to me be different than to some other combination of demographics?
Yeah, I mean, so that's a great question. I mean, and the reality is that the communication just has to be clear to everyone, right? And we have to make sure that we're being accurate in every time that we're communicating something. But I think also the tone of which we say certain things matters, right? And how we project or even ask people and try to invite people to interact with us really matters to us. And I think I will tell you that we have a set of emails that we were looking at from a collections perspective, right? So when a customer goes delinquent, the one thing that I know, because I started my career in collections, is that nobody wants to hear from you when they owe you money, right? And so picking up the
Preach.
phone,
Yeah.
right? Exactly, right? So picking up the phone and talking to you is very hard to do that, right? But how do you invite someone to do that, and how do you get across to them that it's okay for you to pick up the phone and talk to you, engage with you, right? And
Right.
quite honestly, when we sat down to look at how our communication was being sent out, it was very it catered more towards someone who was very analytical. We would give numbers to say very specifically exactly how much you owed, when you owed it by, the date. And we would say specifically who you had to call and how you need to, what did you need to be prepared for, and all these other kind of things. And they're very structured, right? And the reality is that it's more than just gender. It's more than just ethnicity. It's really about diversity of thought also, right? And how you interact with customers to understand what's going to make them respond. And so we actually took all of those letters and those emails that we had, and we sat them in this group, And I will tell you, we have a great email marketing team that has done just a fantastic job with really kind of looking at that and saying, yeah, we don't need to communicate this way, right? Like, if what is the value of the brand, right? What do you want to project? What kind of tone? What is the persona that you would like to project from this brand and from this product, so that you're communicating that way in across all of your communications? And we actually identified, when we went through this exercise just to build a product, we identified 3 or 4 different groups that we were, kind of this is our target audience. And some of it had to do with gender, and some of it had to do with their financial status. Some of it had to do with their education. Some of it had to do with the types of tools that they interact with, a mobile phone or PC or a laptop or an iPad. We took into consideration a myriad of different dimensions that we could interact with and how we could interact. And we boiled all that down to a voice for our emails. And once we found out what that voice sounded like, it's almost like everybody started to kind of take on that character, that person that we wanted to be, that was very amiable to all these different groups that were our target audience. And we started to change our communications. And I'll tell you, Mike, it was a great exercise to go through, because once we started to really change the communications that we had, our interactions with our customers shot out of the roof. We had a 50% open rate on all of our emails. We had like a 20% click to open rate within with folks taking action on the emails that we sent out. And it was far well and above our expectations, and where like a lot of our benchmarks were for these interactions. But we had to do that in consideration with all the different intersections that a customer, or dimensions of where who our customers are, right? And we had to consider more than just one type of customer, and stop being very stoic and structured about the way that we communicate. And so again, it's more than just the product itself, because we can get to help people understand how to interact with the product, but how you communicate with them, how you interact with them, how you even express to them that some of the dimensions that make them that make up who they are represented here, or at least considered in the way that we design those products.
Can you give me a for example of how, because of course I'm, 40-year-old white guy, and everything has been written to my benefit. I wish I was 40. I'm over 40. Everything has been, I think it's fair to say, been written for my benefit. I mean,
Right.
to target my demographic. So
Sure.
what kind of thing would you change to reach a specific different? Give me, and I'll let you pick. I don't want to
Sure.
get canceled, so I'm not going to pick the demographic group. Actually, I kind
Yeah.
of want to get canceled, but I'm just not good enough to do that anybody cares. But so you pick the demographic group, and give me an example of how you would change something to attract them or to communicate better with them.
Sure. I mean, I'll take my own ethnic group, right? Like, the
That's
reality
safe.
is, right? Safe for me, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll pick my own ethnic group. I mean, the reality is that, I will say for myself, and not that I represent my entire ethnic group, but I will say for myself, I'm a black male who grew up in a pretty impoverished area in North Carolina, rural, area that had very little resources to education. I was very fortunate to have a good support group that allowed me to go to college, and through college I learned a lot about. I just started learning about the financial system when I got in college, right? And then throughout my adult years and my own interactions with money and my own interactions with the banking system, I started to learn more about that financial system. So the one thing for me, when I receive any type of advertisement, or if I receive any type of collateral material that wants to talk to me about kind of the new solution, is that I don't want to be talked down to, right? Like, my situation is bad, right? And that I need this product in order to help me to overcome my situation, right? And so you have to be very careful about some of the language that you use sometimes, that doesn't disenfranchise someone, that may come from a background like mine, right? Because I and I say that because I just learned about the financial system when I got to college and I learned and my understanding matured as an adult. So you don't want to say things to me like, this is so simple, a 5-year old can do it,
Oh,
right?
wow.
Or you don't want to say something about, how, even saying things of how savvy I am as a consumer if I use their mobile app, because maybe I don't want to use that. You know what I mean? Like, does that really make me savvy just because I use your mobile app, right? Like, you don't want to infer a particular characteristic about anyone in particular just because you feel like you've brought the solution forward to them, right? And advertising has changed, marketing has changed quite a bit over the years, to be more considerate, and I think a little bit less, a little bit more, I would say more generic in terms of trying to interact, but it's a balance, right? Because marketing is also meant to try to provoke and to be the catalyst and attract people, right? So we've decided to really kind of focus on what is the need that we can focus on, and speak to the need versus the person. And now I will tell you, if you look at other companies also, there are certain companies in the marketplace today, that very specifically call out, the need for Black Americans to become more financially savvy, right? And that they are very hardcore, representing Black wealth as being a very important tenet of the Black community, and that you should reinvest back into Black businesses, and attempt to go into Black banks and things of that nature. And while I agree with much of that. What is hard sometimes to accept for the Black community is this idea that I'm disadvantaged, and that because I've worked really hard for where I'm at right now, and a large portion of Black America has done exactly that. Have worked really hard to kind of achieve certain levels of success and to achieve certain levels of accolades with their positions and things of that nature. I mean, in fact, there are more Black women that have PhDs in the U.S. now than there ever has been in history, and in fact, they're outpacing other ethnic groups in terms of them reaching that type of education level, right? So, with that being said, why speak to me as I'm immediately disadvantaged just because you identified in some database that I might be Black? I don't necessarily want you to try to appeal to me from a disadvantaged perspective. I'd much rather celebrate where we're at or where I'm at, right? And invite me in because there is a bigger purpose, a big, that is being served, versus just because here's the deal. Like, I've worked really hard in my lifetime and I feel comfortable with where I'm at financially, but the reality is that I don't feel like my financial system is really uplifting the whole community, right? Like, that's a huge responsibility to put on me as an individual, right? So why sell me that for a financial product? Why invite me in that way? That this is my way of doing that. Now, it's not completely misguided, because there is a purpose behind all of that, and I understand the purpose. Because there's this need and desire to get more collective, and with using that wealth in order to uplift the Black community, and I wholeheartedly believe that. In fact, we have to do that more, in terms of supporting minority institutions that are even in the DFW area, and part of what we've done at Elevate is actually invite a lot of minority businesses in to kind of showcase some of the things that they do. Like yoga studios, the flamenco. We did Hispanic Heritage Month, and we had a flamenco company that's a Hispanic owned nonprofit that we brought in. We have Family Equality, which is another nonprofit organization that does that helps with adoption and foster care for the LGBTQ community. We invite them in to kind of tell us more about themselves so that we learn a little bit more. And again, it helps us in particular with trying to understand how to speak to people in a way that doesn't make them feel even more disenfranchised, but also understands accomplishments, and so that we can actually speak and celebrate those things, in congruence with that.
That is so interesting. So we're running out of time, but tie tie back the how having a diverse employee population at Elevate, and especially how your employee resource groups work and how they affect your product decisions.
Yeah, so we're still at the very beginnings of a lot of those employee resource groups getting to that point. I think the sole purpose of the employee resource groups today is really more focused around building our corporate culture and changing that mindset, changing the hearts and minds of the people that are there to be more inclusive, right? To make sure that we're considering other people that are very different than us and considering those folks. I mean, we have a very accomplished group of folks that work at Elevate from an education perspective, lots of good work experience that they come from. I mean, these are some very talented folks that work there, and I've actually been very challenged to make sure that I kind of step myself up every time I walk into the office because I got some really smart people that work for me. But I think again, just getting ourselves out of our own little nutshell and understanding people that are very different from us makes us a lot more considerate of the folks that are around us. Now, I think eventually we're going to get to that point where we take that and we start to channel that higher knowledge, that higher understanding, and higher introspective, and start to push more of that into our product development, into our technology, so that we are considering others. Right? We have about a little over 2 to 3 million people that we've served throughout Elevate, and quite honestly, the marketplace is about 26 million people. Why is it that we can't get to a higher number at this point? And those are some of the things that we're starting to consider: is who have we left out, of our marketing, of our advertising? Who have we left out of, from a not just from a financial need perspective, but also just from a demographic perspective? Are there other areas that we can focus our attention on to try to find, even if it's a niche product, for a particular area? And we love working with banking institutions that want to, to have that type of a focus also. And we want to work with even marketing agencies that will bring in some of the ideas that they have around how to better serve some of those communities also, and use that in our advertising, our product development and design. But then also, I think the other thing that we're trying to do is also change how we recruit, where we recruit, and being a little bit more inclusive about that. Also changing up some of the materials that we have. That, are we inviting people from different backgrounds with the materials that we have? It's more than just going to an HBCU and saying, I'd like to hire, as many students as I possibly can from this HBCU, because that's not really, that's a staple. It should be in place and people should do that. But the reality is we can go to SMU and we can go to the Black Students Association and find, students from there, right? We can go to, UTD and ask the Hispanic student community, hey, I'd love to maybe post this job here, or how can we create some sort of an intern feeder program that, that channels there? And could we create a scholarship program for a minority population? If you, in exchange, give us more information about your community so that we can make better decisions about our products. And we want to just kind of crack the nut a little bit and use everything that we have at our disposal, so that we're not just kind of, following the same system that we have for all these years and just ending up with the same products all the time, right? Like, we've got to tear down some of the institutional things that we've done over time and really start to look for ways to be more innovative by, kind of cracking open everything that we have available to us.
That's really really interesting. One last question, because I know
Sure.
I've got at least one listener out there wearing a Che Guevara T-shirt and wants to burn down the entire American enterprise. Um, isn't I'm going to pose the question the way that person would probably say it. Isn't Elevate just pandering to people in special interest groups just to make a buck off of them?
That's a great question. I mean, the reality is, so I'm going to say emphatically no. Elevate has always had a mantra for serving the underserved. We have it in our core values that we believe that everyone deserves a second chance, right? So it's not just those folks that are underserved that we're serving. We're serving people that are served also, right? Like, people that are in the financial mainstream. If you want to come and use one of our products, we absolutely want to be able to make a product for you also. But by and large, the bigger opportunity to help the financial mainstream is in middle America. It's the folks that are, working every single day of their lives, trying to get ahead, trying to move themselves beyond, that one event that may have happened, right? Like a medical situation, a divorce, kids, unexpectedly happening or expectedly happening. And then all of a sudden you find out that your, daughter likes designer clothes like mine does. And you want to be like, oh my gosh, why, this is not my gene, and, but we all go through it, right? We all go through some sort of financial stress in some way, shape, or form. And does Elevate have every product for every person? No, we don't. But we want to be able to create solutions that make sense specifically for those folks that have been disadvantaged for quite some time, because we believe that we can create a progression story for those customers. Quite honestly, a lot of our products are designed in a way that we don't want you to use them forever. Like we're the stopgap. We're the product that you use when you're having the difficult time and you have limited access to resources. And then once you get to that point where you're good, then go find a better priced product. Go find, the great product that you feel like is the one that you want to live with for the rest of your life. And if you have an idea that you think that we can use in order to create that product for you, we're willing to listen to that too. Over the years, we have tried a myriad of different things, and we have not been a one trick pony by any stretch of the imagination. We tried a bunch of different products, some of which are no longer in our product suite because they just don't work at all, and primarily because they don't work for the company. For the customer. The company itself is has capped our profit margin at a certain level, and once we cap our profit margin, anything that we make over that, we reinvest back into lowering costs for customers, making better products for customers, so that eventually we can get to the point where we can also be the ones that are helping with those mainstream products. And I think we're right now in the process of trying to build out better partnerships with other banking institutions that will help us to be even refer customers to those to them, so that they can get the actual solution that they have, because we only have a limited number of products that we service today. We know that those aren't all the products that someone needs, but I think you'll find that same sentiment in a lot of different companies that are out there. I mean, when you look at like a Mint.com and all those, and even Credit Karma, they have this whole marketplace full of different types of financial products. And while it can be intimidating to go in and look at all of them, I think the reality is the reason why they're putting out all of them is because they know that they got a lot of diverse groups that they got to service in order to create the right type of product for your specific situation, right? And far too long, I think many customers that, especially those that have FICO scores that are less than 700, have gone into their banking institution and said, "Hey, listen, I'm doing okay, living paycheck to paycheck, but I need 4 tires right now, and it's going to cost me $800. Is there any way at all that you guys have like a $800 loan that you could give to me?" And the vast majority of banking institutions are like, "Not really. We can give you a HELOC, and qualify you for a $20,000 line of credit." And you're just like, "I don't want to get into debt for a $20,000 line of credit. I just want $800 for some tires," right? And how do you do that? And the financing options that you get if you go to a retailer, or if you have to go to, like, especially if it forces them to go back to like a payday lender, it's just not great choices, right? So we're trying to find a way to create better solutions for that group of individuals, right? And are we a nonprofit? No, we are not. We are a for-profit company, just like banking institutions are, and many other companies are, right? But it doesn't make us a bad company, because we want to pay people like myself and the team, this fantastic team that we have. But we want to keep everybody in business so that we can get to the point where we're actually creating some valuable solutions, for valuable and valuable for our customers, right? That really kind of help them through whatever short-term situation they have, and eventually get us to the point where we can offer even more long-term solutions for customers over their life cycle.
Good. That sounds like a good capitalist answer. Thank you.
It is a good
Thank you.
capitalist answer.
And nothing
Mixed
wrong
in
with
with a
that.
little bit of socialism, I will
No,
say.
I'm all. I mean, I think I'm a big believer in conscious capitalism, and I think you can serve your shareholders and all the other stakeholders and still make a
Absolutely.
profit. So, but that's all the time we have. Thanks for being with me today, Dion.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. I enjoyed the conversation. And I think more dialogue like this is needed, specifically to better understand that there are companies that are out there that really care about the diverse group of communities that we serve, that we are taking all of those aspects into consideration, and we want to get better at it. Nobody's perfect at it at this point, but the only way we do that is by allowing opportunities for the community to be more vocal to us so that we can hear them, and then we can start to take a lot of that stuff into consideration. And there is no perfect path to it today. We're figuring it out, just like other institutions are, but I think collectively we'll definitely get there. And inclusion is a reality, and will be an even better reality for us in the long term.
And this episode of the podcast will definitely be approved for business credit for HRCI certified professionals, because we've really talked today about how how a company designs its products and communicates about its products to the marketplace using diversity. And I think that's something a lot of HR folks need to really understand as they're trying to evaluate their own diversity efforts internally, and understand how what the people they choose are going to affect those those
that to me
decisions.
is that to me is the most important part, is when you have a diverse workforce, you have far more voices that you can leverage in order to better understand how you need to design those products. We have immigrants, we have different ethnic groups, we have different people from all across the country that have worked in our workforce, come from different socioeconomic groups, different educational backgrounds, and I think some with college, some without, some with advanced college degrees, and quite honestly, that entire ecosystem is hugely valuable to the ideas, to the innovation, and also to really kind of the customer driven approach that we take to all of our products at Elevate. And quite honestly, I think that the our folks are going to be you know wildly successful as they start to become more involved with the community in the DFW area, and start to become DEI ambassadors and talk a little bit more about how DEI has impacted not just the culture at Elevate and why they want to stay there, but also how it impacts the way that they think about doing their job. Because I have system developers that come to me with ideas about how we can better serve certain demographics, and they actually read our website now and say, you probably shouldn't say this, or you probably should say that, to be more inclusive. And I appreciate that, because quite honestly, it's not just a responsibility of HR for DEI. It's not just a responsibility of our DEI program. It's our legal and compliance. It's our risk team. It's our technology team. Everybody is responsible for being more inclusive and contributing to the goal of being more financially inclusive. And if everybody's responsible, then we all have to be better educated on what it means to be inclusive.
Perfect. And that, my friends, is what you call a French goodbye. Uh, Thank you for listening. You can find previous episodes, show notes, and contact info for our guests at goodmorninghr.com, or on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube. And don't forget to follow us wherever you get your podcasts. Rob Upchurch is our technical producer, and Imperatives marketing coordinator, Katie Bautista, keeps the trains running on time. And I'm Mike Coffey. As always, don't hesitate to reach out if I can be of service to you personally or professionally. I'll see you next week, and until then, be well, do good, and keep your chin up.